Viktor Volkov was on his knees in the mud. The man who owned the city, who commanded legions of soldiers, was now alone in the pouring rain at the shipping yards. His personal guard lay dead in a circle around him, executed by their own backup. Standing over him was Dmitri, holding Viktor's own gold-plated Desert Eagle. "You look confused, old man," Dmitri laughed, the sound sharp against the crash of thunder. "You spent all week chasing a delivery girl because I told you she was the thief. You were so busy looking down at the gutter, you didn't see the knife at your throat." Viktor spat blood onto the wet pavement. The realization hit him harder than a bullet. Nia hadn't stolen the money. She had tried to stop the transfer. He had exiled the only person loyal to him, and now he was going to die for it. Dmitri pressed the cold steel of the barrel against Viktor's forehead. "Any last words, boss?" 2 hours earlier, the revolution wasn't starting in a war room. It was starting in the basement of a 24-hour noodle shop. Nia stood on a plastic crate, looking out at a sea of wet helmets and exhausted faces. 50 riders. The ghosts of the city. They were underpaid, invisible, and tired. They didn't care about mob wars. But they cared about Nia. "They blocked the highways," Nia shouted, her voice raw. "They have SUVs, machine guns, and millions of dollars. But they don't know this city. They don't know the alleyways. They don't know the one-ways." She held up her phone, displaying the GPS tracker of Dmitri's convoy. "Tonight we aren't delivering food," she said, pulling her visor down. "We're delivering a king. Subscribe to see the invisible army go to war." The basement of Mama Kim's 24-hour noodles smelled of steam, wet asphalt, and exhaustion. It was the unofficial headquarters for the city's gig economy. A bunker where riders came to thaw out their fingers and complain about non-tippers before heading back into the storm. Nia pushed through the heavy plastic curtains, water streaming off her delivery jacket. The room was packed. 50 riders, young, old, immigrants, students, huddled over bowls of broth, their phones glowing blue against their tired faces. No one looked up. To them, she was just another wet ghost looking for a recharge. Nia climbed onto a plastic crate in the center of the room. Her legs felt like lead. She had spent the last hour hacking the logistics grid from a motel room, tracing Dmitri's convoy. She knew the route. She knew the time. But she couldn't stop a motorcade with a scooter. She needed an army. "Turn off your apps," Nia said. Her voice was shaky, swallowed by the clatter of spoons and conversation. Nobody moved. A guy in the corner laughed. Nia grabbed a metal ladle from a passing tray and slammed it against the steel ventilation duct overhead. The clang was deafening, sharp enough to cut through the noise of the rain and the kitchen. The room went silent. 50 pairs of eyes turned to her. "Turn them off," Nia said again, louder this time, her voice finding the steel edge Viktor had forced her to develop. "Nobody is delivering anything for the next hour." "Who are you?" A large man with a beard grunted, standing up. He wore the teal jacket of a rival delivery app. "I've got a surge pricing alert. I'm not losing money because you want to make a speech." "You're already losing money," Nia snapped, pointing at him. "We all are. We ride in the rain, we dodge traffic, we get spit on by doormen, and for what? $6 a trip? While the people in the penthouses treat us like traffic cones." The man hesitated. The room was listening now. "Tonight isn't about food," Nia continued, scanning the crowd. "Tonight, the men who own those penthouses are at war. And one of them, the one who thinks he can burn this city down and pay us to clean up the ash, is moving a convoy through the docks right now." She pulled out her phone and held it up. The screen displayed a live map of the city, overlaid with a complex web of glowing red lines. "That's Dmitri Kozlov," she said. "He has 5 armored SUVs. He has automatic weapons. He has a payroll that could buy this entire block. He thinks he owns the streets because he can buy the police." She looked at the riders. She saw the fatigue in their eyes, the resentment of 1,000 slammed doors and stolen tips. "But he doesn't know the streets," Nia said, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "He relies on GPS. He relies on main roads. He sees the city as a map. We see it as a nervous system. We're couriers, girl, a young woman near the front said softly. We don't have guns. We don't need guns, Nia replied, looking directly at her. We have the city. We have the alleys too narrow for SUVs. We have the traffic lights we can time. We have the construction sites, the one-ways, the shortcuts that don't exist on Google Maps. She gestured to the door, to the storm raging outside. Dmitri is trapping a man at the shipyards. If he kills him, the new management won't just ignore us, they'll crush us. But if we stop him, if we swarm him, we remind them that the city doesn't work without us. She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. I need eyes on every intersection from 4th Street to the harbor. I need blockers in the tunnel. I need noise. I need chaos. Nia zipped up her jacket, the sound distinct in the quiet room. She pulled her helmet on, the visor snapping shut with a click that sounded like a weapon loading. So, she said, her voice muffled but amplified by the plastic shell. Who wants to take a heavy load? For a second nobody moved. Then, the bearded man in the teal jacket reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out his phone and swiped a finger across the screen. You are now offline, the robotic voice announced. One by one, the sound rippled through the room. 50 phones going dark. 50 engines starting up outside. The invisible army was waking up. The shipping container maze was a graveyard. Rain drummed against the hollow steel walls, masking the silence of the 12 men lying face down in the slush. They were Viktor's personal guard, the elite of St. Petersburg, and they had been slaughtered in less than 30 seconds. Viktor Volkov was on his knees. His tailored suit was ruined, heavy with mud and water. He gasped for air, clutching his side where a bullet had grazed his ribs, sending fire through his nervous system. He tried to stand, but his legs refused to obey. For the first time in 20 years, the butcher was not the one holding the knife. Dmitri walked through the carnage, stepping casually over the body of a man he had called a brother yesterday. He held Viktor's own gun, a custom gold-plated Desert Eagle loose in his hand. You're getting old, Viktor, Dmitri said, his voice calm, almost sympathetic. 10 years ago, you would have checked the perimeter yourself. Today, you trusted the schedule. Viktor looked up, wiping blood from his mouth. You sold us out, he wheezed. To the cartels. I didn't sell us out, Dmitri corrected, stopping directly in front of his former boss. I sold you out. There is a difference. The Sinaloa cartel doesn't want a war in this city. They want a partnership. And you are too proud to share the throne. You are bad for business. Dmitri crouched down, bringing his face level with Viktor's. The rain dripped from his nose, but his eyes were burning with triumph. And the best part? Dmitri smiled. You made it easy. I needed a distraction to move the men into position. I needed you paranoid. I needed you looking at the wrong enemy. Viktor's stomach twisted. The realization hit him harder than the physical pain. Nia, the delivery girl, Dmitri chuckled, shaking his head. I transfer $5 million, plant her fingerprint, and suddenly you're chasing a 22-year-old on a bicycle instead of watching your own accounts. You were so busy playing judge and jury with her that you didn't notice I was opening the gates. Viktor closed his eyes. The image of Nia standing in the rain, stripped of her coat and her dignity, flashed in his mind. I am trying to save you, she had said. He had looked into the eyes of the only loyal soldier he had left and sent her away to die. She tried to stop the transfer, Viktor whispered, the shame tasting like ash in his mouth. She did, Dmitri agreed, standing up and racking the slide of the heavy pistol. She was smarter than you. Smarter than me, maybe. But intelligence doesn't stop a bullet. And right now she's freezing in some alley, and you are kneeling in the mud. Dmitri raised the gun. He pressed the cold muzzle against the center of Viktor's forehead. The metal felt like a coin of ice against his feverish skin. Behind Dmitri, the headlights of 3 black SUVs cut through the gloom. The buyers had arrived. The transaction was complete. The era of Viktor Volkov was over. Don't worry, boss, Dmitri said softly, tightening his finger on the trigger. I'll make sure the girl joins you soon. I hate loose ends. Thunder rolled across the bay, shaking the ground. Say goodbye, Viktor. Dmitri's finger tightened on the trigger. The hammer began to drop. But the sound of the gunshot never came. Instead, a low buzzing drone rose from the darkness behind him. A sound like 1,000 angry hornets swarming inside a tin can. Dmitri paused, frowning. The sound wasn't the deep rumble of cartel SUVs, or the heavy thrum of a police chopper. It was high-pitched, mechanical, and chaotic. It was the sound of the city's arteries bleeding into the closed shipyard. What is that? One of the mercenaries shouted, spinning around and raising his rifle toward the main gate. The answer came in a blinding wall of light. Over the crest of the service road, 50 headlights snapped on simultaneously. They weren't the yellow, disciplined beams of military convoys. They were the cheap, piercing white LEDs of scooters, mopeds, and electric bikes. They cut through the rain like lasers, fracturing against the wet pavement and turning the dark shipyard into a blinding hall of mirrors. Contact! The mercenary screamed, firing a burst into the air. It was too late. The swarm had breached. The riders didn't come in a formation. They came like water bursting through a dam. They poured over the embankment, their small engines screaming as they tore across the mud. They wove between the shipping containers, defying every tactical protocol Dmitri's men had ever learned. Dmitri shielded his eyes, blinding white spots dancing in his vision. He couldn't pick a target. The riders were everywhere, zigzagging, circling, jumping curbs. They were a chaotic, fluid mass of plastic fairings and neon delivery boxes. Kill them! Dmitri roared, turning his gun toward the oncoming flood. Shoot them! His men opened fire, but they were shooting at ghosts. The riders knew the terrain. They dipped behind forklifts and swerved around pylons. The mercenaries, trained to fight stationary targets or heavy vehicles, were paralyzed by the sheer speed and unpredictability of the assault. A rider on a beat-up Vespa drifted dangerously close to a gunman, blasting an air horn before vanishing behind a stack of pallets. The gunman flinched, spinning around, and was immediately blinded by 3 more scooters cresting the hill with their high beams locked on his face. Viktor, still on his knees, looked up through his swollen eyes. He watched a kid in a teal jacket pop a wheelie over the body of a fallen guard, forcing a cartel soldier to dive into the mud to avoid being run over. It was madness. It was beautiful. In the center of the chaos, one bike wasn't swerving. Nia was riding a heavy electric cargo bike, the kind used to haul kegs of beer. She wasn't weaving. She was accelerating. Her visor was down, her knuckles white on the throttle. She saw the perimeter fence, a 10-foot chain-link barrier separating the service road from the inner kill box where Viktor knelt. She didn't brake. She leaned forward, burying her weight into the handlebars. The electric motor whined at a pitch that hurt the ears. Dmitri turned just in time to see the single yellow headlight rushing toward him like a falling star. Stop her! Dmitri screamed, leveling the Desert Eagle. Nia hit the fence doing 40 miles an hour. The metal groaned, stretched, and then snapped with the sound of a gunshot. The chain-link fabric tore open, wrapping around the front of the bike like a steel net, but the momentum carried her through. She burst into the inner circle in a shower of sparks and twisted wire, the bike skidding violently sideways across the wet asphalt, sliding directly between the executioner and the king. The cargo bike shuddered to a halt, its metal frame screeching against the asphalt as it wedged itself like a shield between Viktor and the barrel of Dmitri's gun. Nia didn't wait for the dust to settle. She rolled off the seat, her boots hitting the slush with a splash. Suppression! A voice screamed from the darkness. 3 riders drifted past the gap in the fence, each one ripping the pin from a colored smoke canister, the kind used for football riots and street races. They tossed them into the center of the kill box. Thick plumes of purple and orange smoke exploded outward, mixing with the rain to create a suffocating, opaque nebula. Dmitri fired blindly. Bang! 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 The shots went wide, sparking harmlessly off the pavement. He coughed, waving his hand in front of his face. His tactical advantage dissolved into a blinding chemical fog. Nia scrambled on her hands and knees through the smoke, guided only by the shape of the man crumpled on the ground. She found Viktor by the feel of his suit, wet wool and warm blood. He was staring up at her. His eyes, usually so cold and calculating, were wide with a shock that bordered on reverence. He looked at the scratched helmet, the cheap delivery jacket, the mud on her face. He had expected death. Instead, he got the girl he had thrown away. "You," Viktor rasped, his voice a wet gurgle. "I told you to leave the city." Nia grabbed him by the lapels of his ruined suit. She didn't look like a subordinate anymore. In this chaos, she was the captain. "Shut up and stand up," she hissed, yanking him upward with a strength born of pure adrenaline. Viktor groaned, his legs scrabbling for purchase in the mud. He was a large man, heavy with muscle and dead weight, but Nia jammed her shoulder under his armpit, acting as a human crutch. "Why?" Viktor gritted out, forcing himself upright despite the agony in his ribs. "I put a gun to your head. Because you're the only one who tips," Nia lied, her voice cracking. They stumbled toward the cargo bike. The air around them was alive with the sound of engines. The riders were circling the mercenaries like a pack of wolves, revving their throttles to mask the sound of the escape. A bullet whizzed past Nia's ear, close enough to feel the heat, and slammed into the cargo box of the bike. "They have thermal optics," Viktor warned, his weight threatening to drag them both down. "The smoke won't hold them forever." Nia threw him onto the flatbed of the cargo bike. "Hold on to the rails. Do not let go." She jumped onto the saddle. The electric motor whined in protest as it took on the extra 200 pounds. She kicked the stand up, twisting the throttle. The bike lurched forward, fishtailing in the slick mud before the tires bit into the gravel. Through the thinning purple smoke, Dmitri saw them. He stood in the center of the ring, his eyes stinging, his suit stained with the residue of the flares. He saw the silhouette of the girl hunching over the handlebars. He saw the broken king lying on the flatbed behind her. The humiliation was total. He hadn't been beaten by a rival Don. He hadn't been outsmarted by the FBI. He was being robbed by a gig worker. His calm corporate facade shattered. The mask of the businessman fell away, revealing the rabid dog underneath. "Forget the cargo," Dmitri screamed, his voice tearing through his throat, echoing over the roar of the engines. He turned to the mercenaries, pointing his weapon not at Viktor, but at the mass of swirling lights. "Kill them," Dmitri roared. "Kill them all." The electric motor of the cargo bike whined in agony as Nia pushed it to 45 miles per hour, but the roar of the V8 engines behind them was getting louder. The three black SUVs had cleared the smoke. They were gaining, their reinforced grille guards looking like jaws ready to snap the fragile bike in half. "We can't outrun them on this," Viktor yelled over the wind, clutching his bleeding side. He checked the magazine of the Desert Eagle Dmitri had dropped. 2 rounds. "That's it. We don't need to outrun them," Nia shouted back. "We just need to switch tracks." She wrenched the handlebars hard to the right, skidding the bike into a narrow service alley behind a row of tenements. The tires hopped over a curb, sparking against the concrete. 50 yards down under the flickering yellow light of a dumpster, a battered white Ford Transit was idling. The side read City Fresh Laundry. A rider in a helmet was waiting by the open driver's door. He saw them coming and dove into the back, tossing the keys to Nia as she practically threw the bike to the ground. "Inside. Move," Nia screamed, shoving Viktor into the passenger seat before vaulting behind the wheel. She didn't check the mirrors. She slammed the gear stick into drive and floored it. The van's tires spun on the wet garbage, smelling of burnt rubber, before gripping the asphalt and rocketing forward. They burst out of the alley onto 4th Avenue just as the lead cartel SUV smashed through the cargo bike they had left behind, crushing it into scrap metal. "They're still on us," Viktor growled, watching the side mirror. The SUV wasn't slowing down. It clipped the rear bumper of the van, sending a shudder through the chassis that rattled Viktor's teeth. "Hold on," Nia said. Her face was a mask of terrifying focus. She cut the wheel sharp left. Not onto a road but onto a sidewalk. Viktor braced himself against the dashboard. Are you insane? Market District, Nia replied. Built in 1902. The roads are 12 feet wide. She drove the van straight into the mouth of the old quarter. The SUV followed, its suspension screaming as it jumped the curb. But as they plunged deeper into the labyrinth of brick buildings and iron fire escapes, the physics of the city began to fight back. Nia threaded the van through a gap between a parked delivery truck and a stone archway. She had 2 inches of clearance on either side. She didn't tap the brakes. The SUV driver behind them hesitated. He tried to follow, but the wide, armored body of the Cadillac Escalade wasn't built for historical preservation. The SUV's side panels shrieked as they ground against the brickwork. The side mirrors were ripped off with a violent snap. He's stuck, Viktor shouted, a savage grin breaking through his pain. The second one isn't, Nia said, glancing at the rear view. The second SUV had taken a parallel street and was trying to cut them off at the intersection. Nia saw the headlights sweeping across the building fronts ahead. She knew the timing. She knew the traffic light cycle. She accelerated toward the red light. Nia, stop! Viktor yelled. Cross traffic was flowing, a wall of taxis and buses. She didn't lift her foot. She blasted the horn. Not a polite beep, but a rhythmic tap-tap honk that every cab driver in the city recognized. Courier coming through. Make a hole. A taxi driver instinctively slammed on his brakes. A gap opened, barely the width of the van. Nia shot through the intersection like a bullet. The SUV trying to intercept them T-boned the taxi she had just dodged. The crash was a thunderclap of glass and steel behind them. One left, Nia whispered. But the lead SUV, the one that had scraped through the brickwork, had broken free. It was battered, missing its mirrors, but it was angry. It surged up behind them on the straightaway of the canal road, its high beams blinding Nia in the mirror. The road ahead ended. A massive concrete floodwall loomed 200 yards away. The only exit was a sharp right turn onto the highway on-ramp, but the SUV was pulling up alongside them, blocking the turn. The mercenary in the passenger seat rolled down the window, raising a submachine gun. He's boxing us in, Viktor shouted, raising his pistol. He's forcing us into the wall. Nia looked at the wall. Then she looked at the dark, overgrown patch of weeds directly at the base of the concrete dead end. Put the gun down, Nia said calmly. We are about to hit a wall at 60 miles an hour. It's not a wall, Nia said. It's the old canal maintenance ramp. They paved over the entrance, but the chain is rusted. She yanked the wheel left. Away from the highway. Directly at the concrete barrier. The mercenary in the SUV lowered his gun, confused. He didn't fire. He watched, expecting them to crash. Nia drove straight off the road into the weeds. Viktor screamed. The van hit a hidden decline, smashing through a rusted chain-link gate that had been invisible in the dark. Instead of hitting concrete, the van dropped 4 feet, landing with a bone-jarring thud onto a hidden, subterranean service tunnel that ran beneath the city. Above them, the SUV driver slammed on his brakes too late, skidding to a halt at the edge of the drop, staring down into the black hole where his prey had vanished. The service tunnel exit spat the battered Ford Transit out into the mud of the Solstice Tower construction site, a billion-dollar skeleton of steel and concrete that had been abandoned for months due to union strikes. Nia didn't slow down. She drove the van straight through the ground floor pillars and slammed on the brakes, drifting it sideways to form a barricade against the entrance ramp. The headlights cut out, plunging them into the shadows of the unfinished Colossus. Out! Nia ordered, kicking her door open. Viktor spilled out of the passenger seat, his face gray, blood soaking through his shirt. But his eyes were clear. The shock of the crash had burned away the fog of pain. He looked up at the 40 stories of exposed girders and dark, empty floors above them. We are exposed, Viktor grunted, checking the chamber of the Desert Eagle. The brass casing of the second-to-last bullet glinted in the moonlight. If they have snipers, we are dead. They don't have snipers, Nia said, grabbing a pry bar from the van's tool well. They have rage. Dmitri is angry. He's sloppy. She pointed to a yellow service hoist, an open-air elevator used for hauling drywall. We go up. Level 4. Why level 4? Because level 4 is rigged for the morning shift, Nia said, hitting the up button. I delivered lunch to the foreman yesterday. I know what they left hanging. The hoist rattled to life, ascending with a mechanical groan. As they rose, high beams swept across the ground floor below. Dmitri's battered SUV, followed by the last surviving cartel vehicle, screeched into the sight. Doors flew open. 6 men poured out, weapons raised. Dmitri stepped out last, scanning the shadows. He looked up and saw the cage rising. There! Dmitri screamed, pointing. Take the stairs. Flush them out. The hoist shuddered and stopped 3 feet below the level 4 ledge. Dmitri's men had cut the generator below. Move, Viktor growled. He didn't ask for help this time. He holstered his weapon and hauled himself up, gripping the concrete lip with a strength that defied his injuries. He pulled himself onto the floor, then reached down and grabbed Nia's jacket, hoisting her up beside him in one fluid motion. They were in darkness. The wind howled through the open sides of the building, smelling of wet cement and ozone. The floor was a labyrinth of plastic sheeting, stacked rebar and buckets of sealant. They're coming up the stairs, Viktor whispered, listening to the heavy boots echoing in the concrete stairwell. 6 men. 2 rounds. We don't need bullets for the first 4, Nia whispered back. She pointed to the ceiling. Suspended directly above the open floor plan, right in front of the stairwell door, was a massive pallet of industrial rebar bundles hanging from a crane chain. The load was secured by a tension cable anchored to a steel cleat near the edge of the floor. Viktor looked at the suspended load, 2 tons of cold steel. He looked at the cleat. Then he looked at Nia. For the first time all night, his posture relaxed. He wasn't the wounded old man anymore. He was the butcher. The release pin, Viktor murmured, spotting the tension mechanism. I pull the pin, Nia said, gripping the pry bar. You take the shot. Viktor nodded. He moved into the shadows behind a support pillar, leveling the Desert Eagle not at the door, but at the space in front of it. He steadied his breathing, slowing his heart rate, pushing the agony of his ribs into a small locked box in his mind. The stairwell door kicked open. Flashlight beams cut through the dust. The mercenaries fanned out, tactical and precise, checking corners. Clear left. Clear right. Dmitri walked in behind them, confident, his weapon drawn. He stepped into the center of the room, directly under the shadow of the suspended pallet. Come out, Viktor. Dmitri shouted, his voice echoing off the bare steel. No more running. Let's finish this. Viktor stepped out from behind the pillar. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, illuminated by the city lights behind him, looking down at Dmitri with terrifying stillness. Dmitri grinned, raising his gun. There you are. Viktor didn't fire at Dmitri. He shifted his aim 6 inches to the right, aiming at the mercenary flanking Dmitri, and nodded at Nia. Nia jammed the pry bar into the release mechanism and heaved. The snap of the tension cable sounded like a cannon shot. For a fraction of a second, the 2-ton pallet of steel rebar seemed to hover in the air, suspended by nothing but momentum. Then gravity reclaimed it. The mercenaries looked up, their tactical flashlights catching the falling wall of rusted metal. They didn't even have time to scream. The floor shook with a violence that knocked Nia off her feet. The impact was deafening. A thunderous, grinding crash of metal on concrete that sent a shockwave of dust and debris blasting outward. The scream of tearing steel drowned out the wet crunch of bones. Silence followed instantly. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a tomb. Nia coughed, waving the cloud of pulverized concrete away from her face. She pulled herself up using the pry bar, her ears ringing. In the center of the room, the dust began to settle. The mercenaries were gone. In their place was a chaotic mountain of twisted rebar, buried under the collapsed ceiling supports. Only one man was moving. Dmitri had been standing at the edge of the kill zone. The impact had thrown him backward, slamming him against a concrete pillar. He was slumped on the floor, his legs pinned beneath a stray bundle of steel rods that had shattered his shins. His gun lay 5 feet away, just out of reach. He groaned, his hands scrabbling uselessly against the rough floor, his face a mask of gray dust and red blood. He looked up, eyes wide with the animal panic of a trapped rat, and saw a shadow emerging from the haze. Viktor walked through the dust. He moved slowly, favoring his left side, but his steps were steady. He didn't look at the carnage. He didn't look at the dead mercenaries. His eyes were locked on Dmitri. Dmitri clawed at the ground, dragging himself an inch backward, whimpering as his crushed legs dragged over the concrete. Viktor, wait. Listen. The cartel. They'll kill us both if I don't call in the check-in. Viktor stopped. He stood over Dmitri, blocking out the city lights. He looked down at the man who had stood at his right hand for a decade. There was no anger in his face anymore. No betrayal. Just a hollow, terrifying indifference. Viktor raised the Desert Eagle. Business is concluded, Viktor said softly. Dmitri opened his mouth to beg, to scream, to bargain. Viktor pulled the trigger. The boom of the heavy caliber round echoed through the empty skeleton of the skyscraper. Dmitri's head snapped back. His body went limp, sliding slightly down the pillar before coming to rest. The king was dead. Long live the king. Viktor didn't lower the gun immediately. He watched the body for 3 seconds, ensuring the threat was absolute. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he engaged the safety and let the weapon drop to his side. He turned around. Nia was standing by the hoist controls, clutching the pry bar like a weapon. Her chest was heaving. She was covered in mud, grease, and the dust of the men she had just helped kill. She looked wild, dangerous, and utterly exhausted. Viktor looked at her. The silence stretched between them, heavier than the steel on the floor. He didn't say thank you. He didn't apologize for the gun he had put to her head earlier. Those words belonged to a different life. He simply looked at her, acknowledging that the board had changed. The pawn had taken the knight. And now, the king and the queen were the only pieces left standing. The elevator ascended smoothly, the digital numbers climbing in silence. This time there was no storm raging outside. The morning sun bathed the city in a cold, hard light, reflecting off the glass towers that Viktor Volkov owned. Nia stood in the center of the car, her hands jammed into the pockets of a cheap denim jacket. She wasn't wearing the silk gown. She wasn't wearing the delivery helmet. She was just Nia. She touched the bruise on her cheekbone, a souvenir from the crash in the construction site. It was fading, turning a sickly yellow, but it throbbed when she clenched her jaw. She knew how this meeting went. She had seen it in movies and she had seen it on the streets. The boss survives. The boss cleans up the mess. And then the boss cuts ties with the loose ends. She expected a briefcase full of non-sequential bills and a plane ticket to somewhere with no extradition treaty. Thanks for the help, kid. Now disappear. The doors opened. The penthouse was immaculate. The shattered vases had been replaced. The bullet holes in the mahogany paneling were gone, filled and polished until the wood looked like liquid glass. The smell of gunsmoke and fear had been scrubbed away by expensive lemon oil and fresh espresso. Viktor was sitting at his desk reading a newspaper. He wore a fresh charcoal suit, tailored to hide the bandages wrapped around his ribs. He looked exactly as he had the first night she met him, immovable, ancient, and dangerous. "You're late," Viktor said, not looking up from the paper. "Traffic," Nia replied, stepping onto the Persian rug. She didn't flinch this time. She didn't look at the guards because there were none. The room was empty save for the two of them. Viktor folded the newspaper slowly and set it aside. He looked at her. His eyes were still cold, but the dismissive glaze was gone. He was looking at her the way he looked at a rival. "I assume you are here for your payment," Viktor said. "I'm here because your driver dragged me into a town car at 8 a.m., Nia corrected. "But yeah, payment works. My bike is totaled, and I have 50 riders who need hush money." Viktor reached into his desk drawer. Nia braced herself for the envelope of cash. She was ready to take it and run. She was done with warlords. She was done with being shot at. Viktor pulled out a thick blue folder bound in legal tape. He didn't toss it. He slid it across the obsidian desk. It stopped exactly at the edge, inches from her hand. I don't carry cash, Viktor said. It's vulgar. Nia frowned, looking at the folder. What is this? Dmitri was a soldier, Viktor said, leaning back in his chair. He thought in terms of bullets and territories. He didn't understand that blood is just the currency of the stupid. Real power isn't killing your enemy. Real power is controlling the road they drive on to get to the funeral. Nia opened the folder. It wasn't a check. It was a stack of legal documents. Her eyes scanned the dense legalese, catching key phrases that made her breath catch in her throat. Transfer of assets. Logistics division. Volkov Transport and Shipping. 51% majority stake. She flipped to the signature page. Viktor's signature was already there, bold and sharp. Next to it was a blank line with her name typed beneath it. Nia Bishop, Director of Operations. She looked up, stunned. You're giving me the shipping fleet? The warehouses? I am giving you the veins of the city, Viktor corrected. You told me you see what people ignore. You utilize the grid better than my entire security apparatus. You turned a delivery app into an army. He picked up his espresso cup, taking a slow sip. I don't need another bodyguard, Nia. I can buy muscle. I need someone who knows which way the wind is blowing before the storm hits. Nia looked at the document. It was worth millions. It was legitimate. It was a crown. And if I sign this? Nia asked, her voice quiet. Does that mean I work for you? Viktor set the cup down. He looked her dead in the eye. Employees get paid, Viktor said. Partners get equity. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a fountain pen, heavy black with a gold nib. He set it on top of the document. Sign it, Viktor commanded softly. And then tell me how we are going to fix the supply chain in the South District. Nia picked up the pen. It was heavier than it looked, weighted with gold and expectation. The nib scratched against the thick paper, the sound loud in the quiet room. She didn't hesitate. She wrote her name in a sharp, angular script that looked nothing like the jagged signature she used to scribble on delivery receipts. She capped the pen and pushed the folder back. Viktor didn't check it. He simply closed the file and placed his hand on it, sealing the pact. Volkov Logistics is currently a shell, Viktor said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. It has trucks, ships, and warehouses, but it has no brain. It bleeds money because it follows rigid, outdated routes. You will fix that. He walked over to a small safe built into the bookshelf. He spun the dial, the tumblers clicking with precision. You are not just managing freight, Nia. You are building a shield. The FBI looks for cash. They look for drugs. They do not look at a legitimate logistics firm that pays its taxes, offers dental insurance to its drivers, and delivers faster than Amazon. He pulled out a set of keys and a sleek unbranded smartphone. He placed them on the desk. You run the white market, Viktor said. You make the company so efficient, so profitable, that no one dares to look at what travels in the shadow of your trucks. You are the light that blinds them to the dark. Nia reached out and took the phone. It was already on. The screen displayed a live dashboard of the city's shipping lanes, the same data she had hacked the night before, now given to her freely. And the riders? Nia asked. The ones who saved you. Hire them, Viktor said, turning to look at the map on the wall. All of them. Give them bikes that don't break down. Give them a living wage. You said they were an invisible army. Make them yours. But remember. He turned back to her, his face hardening. If a single crate goes missing, if a single route is compromised, it is not the police who will come to your office. It will be me. The threat hung in the air, comfortable and familiar. It wasn't malice. It was just the terms of service. Nia stood up. She picked up the keys. They were for the main office at the Pier 4 terminal, a building she used to deliver sandwiches to, where the security guards wouldn't even let her use the lobby bathroom. Now she owned the building. She walked past Viktor, toward the floor-to-ceiling glass wall that overlooked St. Petersburg. The rain had finally stopped. The city was washed clean, gleaming in the pale morning light. From down on the asphalt, the city was a maze of red lights, potholes, and angry drivers. It was a place of noise and struggle. But from here, from the 45th floor, it was silent. She watched the traffic flowing through the arteries of the highway. She didn't see cars. She saw patterns. She saw inefficiencies. She saw a grid that was waiting to be conquered. She looked down at the tiny specks moving on the sidewalk, people rushing to jobs they hated, invisible and powerless. Yesterday she was one of them. Today she was the hand moving the pieces. Nia Bishop placed her hand against the cold glass. The reflection staring back at her wasn't a survivor anymore. It was a player. She tapped the phone screen, initiating a fleet-wide broadcast to the riders. "All units," she whispered, her voice echoing in the quiet power of the penthouse. "Clock in." The screen lit up with 50 green indicators. If you enjoyed the ride, subscribe for more stories where the underdog takes the throne.